Game begin.
Welcome to Open World at Oklahoma Contemporary's Kirkpatrick Main Gallery here in Oklahoma City. The exhibition currently on view, Open World, features works across a variety of disciplines, all focused on the intersection between video games and contemporary art. This exhibition takes as a point of departure a known fact that video games, of course, are already art. What this is exploring in the exhibition is the ideas that are contained within video games, video game culture, the design, the technology, the visual artistry, the sound design that are at play in those imaginary worlds that video game designers play, but also reflect the lived experiences, realities, socioeconomic conditions, and other political factors at play in the world around us. These artists collected together in this show, curated by Teresa Benmister, originally for the Akron Art Museum, all are interested in video games and video game culture. So as we go through this tour, you'll see examples of photographs, actual playable interactive video games, works that are using traditional materials like oil paint or ballpoint pen to create drawings and paintings. And what's most exciting of all is as you walk through the gallery, those of you who remember playing video games in arcades back in the day may get a rush of nostalgia as you hear the sounds pinging and bing-bonging all over the place as you experience the works here in Open World. Today we understand video games are played by people all over the world. In the United States, over 60% of Americans play video games on a regular basis. And because of the revolution with smartphone technology, as of today, women comprise the majority of gamers. So even if you've never played a video game in your life, there's something to reflect on, engage with, and learn from in this exhibition. And if you are a gamer, a hardcore fan, or someone who grew up with video games, there's plenty to reminisce about and even gain a new perspective about on video games. There are over 70 objects on view in the gallery as part of this exhibition, so we don't have time to look at everything. But I wanted to highlight a few of the works that offer a glimpse of the type of diversity of media and of perspective available for visitors to experience. Here we have 3 untitled works by Oliver Payne, a British artist that's referencing the video game and arcade culture of the 1980s, during which time he grew up. The artist, Oliver Payne, describes the arcades of that period as a third space for teenagers, allowing them a separate spot from school or home to experience social gatherings, have fun, and engage with the world around them. These particular works are a reference to both shops closing and the typical practice in Britain and elsewhere of hanging signs upside down when a business has closed for good. In this case, it's also a reference to a practice that some arcades would adopt when a video game was out of service, but they still wanted to keep it on so that players could see the sights and hear the sounds present in the game. So in this case, it's 3 old school games that he's built a light box for to allow them to be illuminated as they would have been in the arcade. But it's also a bit of a melancholy remembrance of those arcades long past, because of course, as console gaming started to take over video games, many arcades shuttered permanently. Now there's been a revival with bars combining video games and beer and food. And so now they're creeping back into adult culture as people want to revive the time that they spent in their early childhood and teenage years playing video games. One of the most referenced video game franchises in the Open World exhibition is Grand Theft Auto. In this case, we have the artist Joan Pablos, who is engaging with specific shots from the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas video game. In this case, 3 works, Morning, Firelight, and Pulse, all from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, depict something not typically associated with the game. Moments of extraordinary beauty, the richness of the color, the saturation of the color, the gentle palm trees swaying in the breeze, don't necessarily call to mind the type of violence and aggression that we associate with that video game franchise. And that was exactly the point from the artist. She was struck watching some of the games played by her brother, like Metal Gear Solid and Grand Theft Auto, struck by the violence and the intensity of the games. She actually asked her brothers to find ways to capture some of these beautiful elements in the game as a type of feminist critique, choosing instead to show the beauty that are present in the games and not the violence and the ugliness. And I think that if you had no understanding of the reference point, you still might find these photographs quite beautiful. And in the case of each of these 3, rather than taking a screenshot, as other artists in the exhibition have chosen to do, she actually set up her camera and tripod to capture the image as it was on the television screen. In this part of the exhibition, we have one of the most spectacular works on view in the show, the Feng Meng Bow's Long March Restart. This is a playable video game designed by the artist, featuring 14 total levels and referencing games like Super Mario Brothers, Street Fighter II, Batman makes an appearance, Contra, other classic games from the 80s and early 90s. In this case, though, the character that you're playing the game with is a soldier in the Red Army. Loosely, this is referencing a piece of Chinese history during the Civil War in the 1930s, when the National Army pursued the Red Army over 5,000 miles across China as Mao Zedong attempted to lead the Red Army out of harm's way. And in this case, the weapon of choice is the first cultural product available from the West in China post-Cultural Revolution, of course, cans of Coke. Only this time, they're exploding. Fun for the whole family, but also definitely a piece of cultural history and a reference to some pretty serious global historical topics. What we are viewing now may look fairly familiar to some of you, although it is not the map from Risk, the game of global domination, nor is it an old school map from the early days of European exploration of the globe. Rather, it is a work called The Ambassadors by Butt Johnson, in this case rendered exquisitely in ballpoint pen using really old school classical drawing techniques. In lieu of the types of sea monsters, leviathans, and other elements that would populate those maps, the artist has instead rendered characters from Street Fighter II, and a shout out to Mortal Kombat. We have Goro holding it down in the center there. And the title itself is a reference to a 1553 work of the same title by Hans Holbein, German Old Master. And the skull in that painting is cheekily, instead of a typical human skull, the skull logo of the Grateful Dead. And it can only be seen with proper proportions from a certain angle. So you'll have to come in person to experience it for yourself. We hope you've enjoyed this virtual tour of Open World at Oklahoma Contemporary, on view through February 21st of this year, 2022. So come and see it before it's gone. Game over.
Game over.